Hello, it's Debbie, and I'm on a mission, as I say every show this year, to help you get some insights on how you can take ownership of your health and improve yourself in the future. So, we're working on improving how we age. There's not one size fits all approach. I am a big believer as an FDN practitioner, and I'm a nutritional therapy practitioner and a metabolic health coach. What can we do to improve our health from the inside out is going to be different, looking at your genetics, functional lab testing, look at your metabolism testing, and really identifying signs and symptoms of imbalances using a nutritional therapy intake form can give a lot of clues, as well as looking at your biometrics. Are you testing your heart rate variability, looking at your low frequency to high frequency, the balance of your nervous system, your vagal nerve, and more. So today I have a guest on the show on a similar path, what we're focusing on longevity. And I would love to hear your questions, your comments, suggestions on what you want to learn more from this YouTube channel and podcast on your favorite audio version. So let me know what I can do. I love to dive down different rabbit holes. Hopefully you enjoy them. I will be doing more on AMPK versus mTOR and fat oxidation rates, mitochondria health, as well as the role of NAD in our body and oxidative stress, liver congestion, detoxification, fatty liver disease, non-fatty liver disease. So we're going to talk about all that stuff. So let's talk to our guest today and see what we can learn to take ownership of our health today. Okay, we are going to have a great conversation today with Chris Burres. I am always talking about how to improve our health, Chris, from the inside out at a cellular level. And as I was just sharing before we hit record, really helping athletes of all levels improve how they age. And we want to be fit and healthy from the inside out. Because I think a lot of athletes push themselves too hard, break themselves down, and we almost speed up illness, mitochondria damage, aging. So I'm excited to hear what you have to share. So take it away. Who are you? What do you do? What's your why?
Yeah, so I guess first, thank you so much for having me. This is going to be an amazing conversation, bringing in kind of endurance and those kinds of athletes who you suspect might be doing more damage than good. I think that's becoming top of mind awareness now. Like people are really, if they weren't aware of it, which seems a little crazy, that's certainly becoming aware. And I've got some great kind of data points, if you will, for kind of extreme endurance athletes. I kind of am not supposed to be here. I think I hinted that before we got started. I was not supposed to be in the health industry. I was not supposed to have written a book called Live Longer and Better. I was not supposed to have done a longevity summit where I interviewed 55 experts in longevity, including like Dave Asprey, Stephen Gundry, Ben Greenfield, who I think you're kind of one of his coaches.
Mm-hmm.
This is not where I was supposed to be. Here's where I was supposed to be. I'm the oldest and longest manufacturer of this molecule on the planet. So I'm holding up a model of a molecule. If you're listening, just imagine a soccer ball where the lines on the soccer ball represent the bonds between the carbon atoms. So we have a spherical molecule of 60 carbon atoms. The molecule was discovered in 1985 at Rice University here in Houston. That's where we're based. And the three scientists who discovered it won the Nobel Prize in 1996 for that discovery. So a short 11 years from discovering the molecule to being awarded the Nobel Prize. And as I mentioned, we started manufacturing it in 1991, so a full 5 years before they were even awarded the Nobel Prize. The molecule is amazing. The way I describe it is it performs as well or better than the current best material in almost every application. So it makes better inks, better batteries, better tires, better photocells. And this is often where people are like, wait, I thought this is health. We were talking health. And you just said inks, batteries, tires, and photo. I've literally never woken up, looked out at my car and thought, what part of my car battery should I be consuming on a daily basis? And interestingly, the story gets a little worse first. So one of the shapes on the, and by the way, we call this molecule ESS60. One of the shapes on the exterior of this ESS60 molecule is the same shape as benzene. Now, benzene is ubiquitous in modern society. And in fact, we don't have modern society without benzene. And just to prove it, just look around you and imagine everything that is plastic gone, because the foundational molecule for plastics is benzene. Many medicines, including aspirin, the foundational molecule is benzene. And then a lot of detergents. So we don't, it's not only is it everywhere, we just don't have modern society without benzene. But benzene, when it's on its own, is known to be toxic and known to be carcinogenic.
Mm.
So because that benzene shape is on the exterior of this ESS60 molecule, they thought the molecule would be toxic, and they put it in a toxicity study. In that study, they gave test subjects, in this case it was Wistar rats, water, olive oil. So water was the control group, olive oil was another kind of control and test group, and then olive oil with as much of the ESS60 molecule as we can get.
Oh, we just lost your sound. Oh, can't hear you.
Can't hear me?
Oh, now I can hear you. Okay, go on.
That's interesting. Okay, but we're good.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, let me see if I can get everything. So instead of being toxic, the test subjects that they gave it to lived 90% longer than the control group. So that's the single longest longevity experimental result on mammals in history. And it's peer-reviewed published research. And I'm very proud to say my lab provided the material, and my lab is mentioned in that original study. And you can imagine that study, a 90% extension of life, changed my business partner and I from this trajectory of just continuing to be happy-go-lucky carbon nanomaterial scientists, manufacturing this soccer ball-shaped molecule called ESS60, and kind of thrust us in the direction of getting into the health supplement industry. And so that took us on this very interesting journey, right? So that study came out in 2012. By mid-2013, we started getting calls from this really wacky, crazy group called biohackers. And I can say wacky and crazy because I am now a biohacker, and so it's very affectionate. And they were asking us, hey, how much of this should I consume? And what my business partner and I actually heard when they asked this question was, how much of that stuff that you put into ink, batteries, tires, and photocells and sell to research institutions around the world, how much of that stuff should I be consuming? And my business partner and I kind of thought, and we thought the answer should be zero. We actually added not for human consumption to our labeling in mid-2013. Just to be clear, a survey of the literature shows that the molecule was safe, but we were just very conservative carbon nanomaterial scientists and uncomfortable with like this kind of really massive pivot for the molecule. We stayed in that condition where we had not for human consumption on the labeling until the latter part of 2017. We would get phone calls, 2 to 3 phone calls a week of these crazy, wacky biohackers saying, hey, Chris, my knee pain is gone. And we would like, hey, you mean the knee pain of your rat? Because it literally says not for human consumption on the labeling. And they go, yeah. Now, if my rat weighs 275 pounds and works out, HIIT training 3 times a week, how much should my rat be taking, right? And those were the kinds of conversations that we were having. In the middle of that time period, my business partner and I are getting together every quarter. We're like, do we want to get into the health supplement industry? It's a very different industry than delivering commercial quantities of carbon nanomaterials, right? So we would sell a black powder, right? So it's carbon, so it would be a black powder to different institutions around the world. And when they got that black powder, they would give it to a research assistant. They would give it to a graduate student who had the equipment and the know-how to test that and confirm that we shipped them what we sold them, which, as you know, is not how the supplement industry works, right? Nobody's testing on the consumer end, right? So we weren't comfortable. I actually found a paper that said 50% of the supplements that this particular research group had purchased off of the market did not have in them what they said they had in them, right? So the antithesis of the market we were serving. Finally, at the end of 2017, a guy with a big YouTube following started talking about all the benefits he was getting taking the product on a daily basis. And our phone went from ringing 2 to 3 times a week to 10 times a day. This was a bigger entrepreneurial opportunity than my business partner and I had realized. We asked ourselves 2 questions. The first is a moral question. Are we comfortable selling it? I take it. My wife takes it. Everybody on our team takes it. And then the next question was the legal side of things, right? You've got the FDA and you've got the FTC. You got to dot the I's, cross the T's. We do that. And so at the beginning of 2018, we started to work to to bring this product to market. And I'll just share one last thing before, because I've covered so much. Our most consistent testimonial is that people take it in the morning, they report mental focus and energy during the day, and then better sleep that night.
Right, so you lost me about 5 minutes ago. So you guys, you created a molecule, ESS60, you said? Is that what
Yep.
it's? And
Yep.
how does this have to do with longevity? Where, like, you were testing on a rats, it's something to do with your molecule you were sharing, but how does, I don't understand the where we went from you were studying, figure this out, and then what where'd we go to figure out for longevity markers that you're improving, and kind of explain that. I missed
Yeah.
something.
Just to be clear, because I do not believe in taking credit, we did not discover the molecule, right? We were just the oldest and longest manufacturers who delivered the commercial quantities of the molecule to research institutions around the world. They do this study, that study with Wistar rats. They lived 90% longer than the control groups. That's the single
Okay.
longest longevity experimental result. It's peer-reviewed, published research, and the single longest result on mammals in history. And then that shot us in the direction of moving towards, a health supplement. When we finally brought this product to market at the beginning of 2018, we my job, my role as kind of the chief scientist is to figure out, well, one, is a 90% extension of life even a big deal, right? Like, does that, and you have this intuition that it is. You've never walked through a GNC and saw a bottle that said, extend your life by 40%, right? Like, you've just never seen that. You've never heard of these studies. And so, yes, it's a big deal. In fact, the next best way to live longer is calorie restriction, right? If you reduce your calorie consumption by 30%, you can extend your life by 30%. I call that the starve yourself 1/3 to death diet. Nobody signs up for that diet. Like, they don't, maybe they need a new marketing spin, maybe some new PR company. But that's a 30% extension of life, by reducing your calories by 30%. We're talking in this study a 90% extension of life. And so then my next thing, yes, it's a big deal. What might the mechanism of action be, right? And so
Mhm.
I'm going to walk you through my thought process on 3 steps. So the first is, again, our most consistent testimonial is people take the product in the morning, they report mental focus and energy during the day, and then better sleep that night. If you improve sleep, you will improve mental, physical, and emotional well-being. I'm sure a lot of what you do in coaching is like, how's your sleep? However your sleep is, we've got to make it better, right? Probably. You probably get the rare person who's like, my sleep is perfect, and you actually
Mhm.
query them, and they're like, yeah, it's pretty good. We don't need to worry about that. That's the rare person. So if you're improving sleep, you're improving everything. Then my next thought process was like, well, what does the medical community think about aging, right? They tend to think, this is not everyone, but they tend to think that it's an oxidation and an inflammation process, right? And we can check both of those boxes, and I'll walk us through that. So first, there's an ad hoc study out on the web that shows us to be 172 times more powerful than vitamin C. There's peer-reviewed published research that shows us to be 125 times more powerful than vitamin C. So absolutely check that antioxidant box, and we'll revisit antioxidant because we think it's doing something very unique in the mitochondria. The next is inflammation. We have to be really careful when talking about about inflammation, because the FDA has decided that to talk about inflammation, at least chronic inflammation, is to talk about the diseases of inflammation, which are the diseases of aging, right? So this is
Yeah.
Alzheimer's, arthritis, cardiovascular disease, cancer. If we were to claim that we're solving chronic inflammation, then the FDA says we're claiming that we solve, again, arthritis, Alzheimer's, cardiovascular disease. So much more research would need to be done in order to make those types of claims. What I can share, and what the FDA allows us to share, is that we address acute inflammation. That's inflammation caused by exercise, right? So you've all had a tough workout, or maybe just walked longer one day than normal, and the next day you wake up and you feel that inflammation in your body, we absolutely address that type of inflammation. Going to wrap up inflammation to say that our product fits perfectly in an anti-inflammatory diet. So that's a diet associated with the blue zone people. Those people tend to have reduced incidences of stroke, reduced incidence of heart attacks, and tend to live longer. And so those are the two theories. I'll share with you the next one, but I, again, have been talking a lot. Maybe you've got some questions or want to guide some
Yes, I got
stuff.
a big list going.
Yeah, okay. So this is where we've landed right now. It's called the BOSS theory, and it stands for Buffering Oxidative Stress System. So we know from peer-reviewed published research that this ESS60 molecule gets into the mitochondria. And we know from way back in the 90s that this molecule can hold up to 6 negatively charged particles on the exterior of its cage. And where that comes to be important is, well, quick refresher, I know your audience knows this. You're talking about metabolism all the time. Mitochondria is the powerhouse of every cell. There's between 50 and 5,000 mitochondria in every cell in your body, except for blood cells, which have 0, and brain
Mhm.
and neurons, which have 2 million. That's how much our nervous system uses in terms of energy. Like any power source that we're familiar with, there are negative byproducts, right? Your car going down the road has exhaust. Your power plant has smoke coming out of the smokestack. In the case of mitochondria, it's reactive oxygen species. These are negatively charged particles, right? Internal to the mitochondria, it's got its own coping mechanism, which are the antioxidants glutathione and melatonin. By the way, melatonin, the sleep hormone, our most consistent testimonial sleep. There's a lot of kind of synchronicity here. So a typical mitochondria will manage the reactive oxygen species that it produces with inherent internal glutathione and melatonin. When a mitochondria gets stressed, right? So this can be exercise, right? Certainly
Mhm.
extreme exercise. This can just be a stressful phone call or a stressful email. It overwhelms the glutathione and the melatonin. And now there's reactive oxygen species that are left to run around. I picture them like little bumper cars. Everything they bump into, they're like rusting and causing damage. And that's where we think this ESS60 molecule comes in, right? So we know it's in the mitochondria. We know it can hold up to 6 negatively charged particles. These reactive oxygen species are negatively charged particles. So we believe this molecule holds on to those negatively charged particles so they can't act like little bumper cars running around doing damage until that mitochondria can replenish the glutathione and melatonin to manage them properly. Now, I've got a kind of fun analogy for this. It's the end of Mardi Gras. We're on Bourbon Street. We've got these drunk reactive oxygen species running around, smashing cars and windows and causing all sorts of havoc. And the New Orleans Police Department, the glutathione and melatonin, come onto Bourbon Street, handcuff themselves to these reactive oxygen species, and get them off of Bourbon Street. But what does the New Orleans Police Department do when they're overwhelmed? They stick them in a paddy wagon, right? This ESS60 molecule ends up being that paddy wagon that holds on to those reactive oxygen species until the New Orleans Police Department can replenish the glutathione and melatonin, and then they can handcuff them to these reactive oxygen species and get them off of Bourbon Street. And so that's why we say that this ESS60 molecule is the boss of buffering oxidative stress system.
Okay, so I should have taken a shot of ketones, process all this before. So you're taking the molecule. Now, is this a man-made or do we already have it in your body and
No,
you're
great.
adding it
So
in?
that's a great question. Everyone has been exposed to this molecule. It is a naturally occurring molecule. If you take the soot from a candle flame and you
Mhm.
collect that soot, typically you put a cold steel plate over the candle. That super black soot has parts per million or parts per billion of this ESS60 molecule. So we absolutely have all been exposed to it. To make enough that can go into a supplement, you actually need to manufacture it in a reactor. This is sometimes you think, oh, is it manufactured different than natural? The reality is this molecule is super simple. There are only 60 carbon atoms in it. There's only one way you can throw it together. I don't care if you make it with flame, there's an arc synthesis process. If a lightning strike makes it, it doesn't matter how it's made. It's exactly the same molecule. And yes, it's a naturally occurring molecule.
Okay, so you're putting it in a supplement to help with the New Orleans analogy
Yeah,
that it's almost helping us manage our oxidative stress by taking the bad guys and putting them in the holding car until we can sort out one at a time and go through the oxidative stressors, and then we can gradually take them out. So it's a slower process. So we can have enough glutathione and melatonin on board to deal with the stressors of excess reactive oxygen species.
exactly. That is exactly it. You got
I was
it.
trying to process it. So then we have more, we don't use up so much melatonin and glutathione all at once because we're just gradually working on it, not just a huge impact at once.
Well,
One
I
big
think it's
large dose versus little doses.
I think it's probably a little bit different than that like this, which is if there's reactive oxygen species and there's glutathione and melatonin to manage them, they're getting managed right away, right? It's
Mhm.
when that mitochondria is producing, is, being
Overwhelmed.
taxed and needs,
Yeah.
then it's overwhelmed. And now we've got extra reactive oxygen species that there is no melatonin or glutathione to manage. That's when
Yeah.
we get that oxidative stress. That's when the ESS60 molecule will hold on to them and prevent that damage. I give this kind of an analogy. I'm still working on it, so forgive me if it's a little rough. But if you have a stream of water, like a stream of reactive oxygen species, and if they're just left to their own device, they hit the mud and they start making a hole. If you put a beaker in front of it, a buffer, right, in front of it, that buffer is going to fill up. But if you're not doing something to slow down the tide of reactive oxygen species, eventually it fills up and starts spilling over and you start getting that hole in the mud again, right? So it gives you that buffer for when you're stressing. But if you're just going through your life in a stressed state and you're not managing that, then eventually your buffer, right, your beaker is going to get full and you'll be back to where you are. So you do need to manage that. Now,
Yeah.
it's great because we end up highly stressed and then less stressed, right? And if we can just smooth out the reactive oxygen species that are coming off of those stressed situations, and then we can manage them over time,
Mhm.
that's great. But if we're at a highly stressed point all the time, then this will just give you some buffer zone as opposed to be kind of it's not a cure. It's not additional glutathione or additional melatonin.
Yeah. So similar to when we talk about HPA axis, the hypothalamus talks to pituitary gland to the adrenal gland, and we have that beaker of stress we refer to a lot as practitioners, and that beaker of stress gets overfilled from external overload of stressors that are chronically happening, as well as hidden sources of internal chronic stress. So we get this overfilling cup of our stressors impacting the HPA axis system, which will impact thyroid dysfunction and your sex hormones. But similar to that, you're saying what I've been talking a lot about in the show is how exercise, endurance exercise increases the amount of reactive oxygen species. And as we age, I'm kind of tying this all in that we're focusing on the aging athlete, that we have less antioxidant production. So we have to work harder to not have this overwhelming oxidative stress, excess reactive oxygen species that are a result of the energy factories creating more exhaust, reactive oxygen species from the mitochondria, right? And then we have less natural ability to deal with this excess oxidative stress. So we need more because we're aging and more because we're exercising a lot, right?
Yeah, well, and I
So,
think what you're talking about is diminished ability to handle these reactive oxygen
yes.
species as we age. And so to throw something like ESS60 and assuming our boss theory, and we have lots of reasons, and I'll give you a kind of testimonial in the ultra extreme athlete space. Then this just creates that buffer, right? So where you're
Yeah.
stressing yourself, let's say it's just a morning workout that is, some might argue excessive, but something you're comfortable with, right? That's that peak that if you can spread out that you're managing the reactive oxygen species coming off of that throughout the day because you have this ESS60 buffer beaker, right? Then that's going to make sure you're doing less damage. And I'll share. So we have a two-time U.S. ultra running champion. His name is Anthony Kunkel. He loves our product, and he was actually on Ben Greenfield's podcast maybe 6 months ago. He's the interesting guy who apparently, when he landed to visit Ben, he jogged from the airport to Ben's house. He didn't get any sort of vehicle. Like
Yeah.
Anthony's a cool guy. He's won a U.S. championship in a 50-mile run and a
Mm.
100K, which is a 62-mile run. And the way he describes it. So my first conversation with him, he was like, "Hey, Chris, I started your product. I was taking one serving, which is 1 teaspoon. That's what we typically recommend. I didn't really notice anything, and then I tripled the servings, and I was like, wow, this product could be the difference between somebody who has a running career or a running hobby." And the way he described it is like, I don't believe that it speeds exercise recovery. I believe that it prevents damage in the first place.
Yeah.
And the reason he said that
Makes
is
sense.
because on the last 5 miles of a 50-mile run, something I don't know, maybe you hear that more often, but I don't hear that very often. Where leg strength and stability were previously a problem, they're not a problem anymore. And he said, look, if it were speeding recovery, my 11-day recovery from a 30-mile run would be down to like a 5-day recovery. But I'm
Mm.
just not. His last message to me on this topic was, I did a 30-mile run yesterday. When I went to sleep, I was wrecked. When I got up to use the bathroom in the middle of the night, I was still pretty wrecked. And when I got up, I was ready to train. And if you're dealing with the negative impact of I think we can all agree that Anthony Kunkel is overwhelming his mitochondria. Like, I think we can agree.
Yeah.
Like, he currently runs 120 miles a week. I tend to run like 2 miles at a time. I would literally have to train 60 times a week to get to his. I don't even have the time because my pace isn't fast enough. But so we can agree he's overwhelming his mitochondria. He obviously has a lot of other things dialed in, right? So he does a lot of red light therapy. He's doing cold plunge. He's doing sauna. He's doing everything and optimizing. He's super analytic about how he approaches what he's putting into his body, what impact that is having on his body. But ultimately, he has decided, it makes sense if we're reducing the negative impact of overwhelmed mitochondria, that's going to positively impact an athlete
Mhm.
like Anthony. And I mean, we actually have testimonials from head to toe, and that can be hard to explain unless you're looking at a reduction of negative impact of mitochondrial function.
And mitochondria is our energy currency creating ATP. And the whole thing I keep trying to talk about is creating new mitochondria and getting rid of the old mitochondria to improve our aging process is really important for athletes or non-athletes. And so getting rid of the dead mitochondria or damaged ones, how would that, we're working on this product is helping us reduce the amount of ROS, which would impact the health of the mitochondria. So talk a little bit about that. Like, does it impact the dead mito? Do we need more, get rid of the dead ones, helping, we're having less damage to mitochondria, so we have less damaged mitochondria
Yeah,
function going on?
and I think you're talking about mitophagy, right? So if you
Yeah.
have mitochondria that has become dysfunctional, all right, and needs to be taken out of the system, that's mitophagy. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think so. So when we wrap this all up, let me share this most recent. I'm really excited about this. We had a booth at the A4M Longevity Fest,
Mm-hmm.
and I had a doctor, Dr. Lang Young. We met him at Dave Asprey's biohacking conference last year in Dallas. He came up to our booth in Las Vegas, and I have a video of him saying this because it was just so profound for me. He was like, "Listen, Chris, I don't care if you're male, female, if you're pre-surgery, post-surgery, if you're diabetic, pre-diabetic, cancer. It just doesn't matter. Your product reduces C-reactive HSCRP, so C-reactive protein, dramatically in 4 to 6 weeks." He talked about one particular client who is sitting at a C-react HSCRP of 9, which I've subsequently learned, like, people will tend to think that you have cancer until you prove otherwise if your HSCRP is 9. He wasn't able to move the needle. Our product moved the needle in 4 to 6 weeks. Obviously, we're kicking off a study. I just had a conversation with my team yesterday about how we can get an ad hoc study of this done. Why might that be happening, right? So one of the things that causes inflammation is these reactive oxygen species running around and
Yep.
doing damage, right? And as they're doing damage, that is a signaling molecule. And we think that one important aspect of this ESS60 molecule is not just that it holds on to it, but that the end of the reactive oxygen species is still free to do the signaling. So it doesn't do the damage, but it can do the signaling. So your body is aware that damage is occurring and it needs to take like it needs to take action, right? It needs to do mitogenesis, create more mitochondria in those cells that are overwhelmed, but it again prevents that damage. And so I hope that addressed your question.
Yeah, I'm just trying to, I like to look at the root, go
Yeah.
backwards and go back to the mitochondria create ATP, they create reactive oxygen species. We need to naturally have the reduction in oxidative stress by having the antioxidants. So it's that Goldilocks effect. And then how does that impact our mitochondria? So we're creating less damage to mitochondria. So we have less garbage, that dead cells that we need to take out the
Yep.
mitophagy and then focus on more biogenesis. But that would help us, your product, you're saying, creating less oxidative stress to begin with. So it's less sources of potentially increasing chronic inflammation. And what labs would we use CRP to track all of this that we're causing? So I guess it comes down to more chronic inflammation markers if we don't have something as this to help with the oxidative stress increased.
Yeah, so I have to be very careful, right? Talking about chronic inflammation, as you can imagine. By the way, let's just go
Yeah.
ahead and throw out the FDA has not evaluated our product. It is not intended to treat, diagnose, cure, or prevent any disease. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it will be exciting when we can talk about a study where we've reduced HSCRP in clients, right? Because that is a marker of inflammation, of chronic inflammation. But we will be able to talk about that when we can get some good studies to prove it. But that still won't be making a claim that we're addressing chronic inflammation, right? It's just a marker of chronic inflammation, and so the FDA allows you to you have to play these games. And I know a lot of people give the FDA a hard time. Um, I think they're doing a pretty good job given the
Mm-hmm.
funding that they have. I think there's a lot of people think that they're doing a lot more than we realize, right? As I'll just share this kind of fun thing. It's in my book, Live Longer and Better, where as I was digging into this and we were bringing this to kind of market in earnest. I was responsible for digging in and understanding how does the FDA look at supplements and what can you say about supplements? And there's all sorts of restrictions. But I'll never forget the day I was on the FDA website and I read this line that said, "You do not have to prove that a supplement is safe before you bring it to market." And I took a screenshot of it. I'm like, this is going to disappear tomorrow. There's no way like somebody made a mistake that this is up there. And then you start thinking about it, right? So you could make a supplement that's 10% vitamin C and 90% vitamin D, and I could do the reverse. And these are, in fact, two different supplements, right? Because there are different things in them. And then to expect the FDA to kind of address the infinite possibilities of a supplement before those supplements get to market, it's just not a realistic thing. There is not enough budget. I mean, you could probably take all of our budget, or at least 100-fold
Yeah.
what the FDA has in terms of budget. So they are doing the best that they can. What they tend to do is, as a company that has a supplement on the market, it is our responsibility to report any serious adverse effects to the FDA so that they can keep track of it. And like if somebody reports something and we give it to the FDA is not necessarily going to come and shut us down. We have tens of thousands of customers. That's a one-off situation, but they
Mm-hmm.
want to be able to accumulate data, say like, okay, now it's not one-off, now it's 10% or whatever. We've been very fortunate. We haven't had any serious side effects from people taking our products, so we really haven't had to report anything to the FDA this far. But we're prepared to do that because we understand it's the right process for trying to manage the infinite number of supplements that can be on the market.
So to summarize, what are your reasons for someone to take this supplement? Which
Yeah,
one?
I think let me share this testimonial with you because it kind of walks through that example and it's also kind of funny. So um, I try very hard not to work on weekends. Love to spend family time with my family. My wife is really good on kind of insisting that, and I'm pretty darn good at following it. But one Saturday I was here. This guy comes up and knocks on the door. So I go answer the door. It felt very clandestine. Like, do you have any ESS60? I was like, I do have ESS60. Why don't you come in? And then he bought a bottle. We didn't, we're not a point of sale business. We don't have a retail location.
Mhm.
So I actually had to like take his credit card and run it through our website in order to make the purchase and then give him his bottle. Well, a number of months later, I saw him in the lobby. And the lady who was taking care of him was like, he's back. This is his third purchase. And at the time we were running some sort of 3 bottle special and he was buying 3 bottles. And I was like, this guy is going to give me an amazing testimonial, right? This is early on. We didn't have that many. And so I went and I asked him, I was like, what have you noticed? And it was funny because you could tell he felt bad. He was like, Chris, I really haven't noticed anything. And he goes, and my first thought was, well, it is responsible for the single longest longevity experimental result on mammals in history, right? So you could just say that's the reason I take it because I want to try and emulate that particular result. Um, but then he went on to say, like, so is it good with like, knuckle pain? Right? I'm being very vague here. And I was like, yeah, we have reports of people, improvements in their hands. And he goes, well, oh, then it's definitely helped there. And I used to have this like click, click, click in my knee, and that's gone. And in my head, I'm like, well, it's a shame you haven't noticed anything. And then he goes, I have to add one more thing. Um, well, 2 more things. One was he's going for a jog. He stopped jogging for some number of years, and now he was about to go on his third jog that day. So he picked up jogging again. And he goes, I have to add this one. I have less stress at work. And let me be clear, it's the same job, it's the same people, it's the same stress, but I feel less stress at work.
Mhm.
And and so I think if we go back to most consistent testimonial, people take it in the morning, they report mental focus and energy during the day, and then better sleep that night. If you can just improve sleep, you are going to improve your mental, physical, and emotional well-being. And I don't know if you've read the book by Dr. Matthew Walker, Why We Sleep.
No, I never did. I just forgot about that one. That was a good one.
It is an amazing book. It is the most terrifying book you will ever read about sleep. I call it the Freddy Krueger of sleep books. Remember Freddy Krueger from Nightmare on Elm
Yes.
Street? It would scare people out of your dreams. This book scares you into your dreams because it's 25 years of research Dr. Matthew Walker has done on the negative physiological, mental, and emotional impacts of lack of sleep. There's crazy things like people don't realize how, like we all kind of know, oh, if I don't get enough sleep, I might need an extra cup of coffee. I might be a little grouchy, but it really has dramatic physiological impacts on our body. Every year, we do a multi-billion person study. Actually, we do it twice a year on sleep. You're like, how do you do a multi-billion person study? That's crazy. It's called daylight savings time. And the data is very clear. When we lose that hour of sleep, heart attacks go up by 21 to 23%.
Yeah.
And when we gain that hour of sleep back, heart attacks go down by 21 to 23%. So lack of sleep has a dramatic physiological impact. In fact, Guinness World Records has removed sleep deprivation from one of its Guinness World Records because it'll kill you, right? You will die if you do not get sleep. And there's even diseases where people can no longer sleep and they will eventually die. And it's actually pretty short order. In that book, Matthew Walker talks about the $2 billion sleep aid industry, right? Which is prescription drugs that are taken right before you go to sleep. He makes the point that that they're depressants and what they do in our body, right? So we've been talking about ATP. The A in ATP is adenosine. As adenosine builds up in our body throughout the day, it is a chemical that causes us to desire sleep. These sleep aids will relax the pressure of adenosine so that you wake up without the desire for sleep, right? Which would be incredibly refreshing, right? If you woke up 10 days in a row and all you could think about is like, I wish I could get some sleep, right? And then you wake up on the 11th day and you're like, I don't need any sleep. That would feel amazing. But Matthew Walker points out that the depressant nature of these sleep aids, these prescription quote unquote sleep aids, it doesn't allow you to get the REM or the NREM sleep that you actually, the healing and restorative sleep that you want to get. And I bring that up because that you take right before you go to sleep. Ours you take in the morning and positively impacts sleep. I'm not even sure aware of any of the things that you can take. You can do things, right? You can wake up and exercise. That'll positively impact your sleep that night. You can actually wake up and get exposure to the sun and get your circadian rhythm in line with the rising and falling of the sun, and that will help you to sleep better. But to take something in the morning and positively impact your sleep is pretty profound.
Mhm. So I was asking about the benefits of why someone should take this, but you're talking about sleep, and the guy had, your testimonial shared for that question was all the benefits he had. But why is that? Is what I like to go deeper. Like, is it because of the oxidative stress you talk about before, the longevity factors of cellular resilience? So, yes, there's all these people have different experiences, improve sleep, but how is that the mechanism of action? Is that going back to what you're talking earlier?
Yeah, I think it does fold back to reducing the negative impact of overwhelmed mitochondria. So one of the functions of sleep is cleaning out your system, right? Part of
Mhm.
it is cleaning out the negative byproducts in your brain. And if you're managing those better so that your body can manage the reactive oxygen species, then that will be I kind of picture this, by the way, sleep is not very well understood. And so this is probably a theory that will be removed, but I think it's good to kind of just demonstrate what I'm thinking is that um, when you are sleeping, one of the things is time to clean up the mitochondria. And if the mitochondria is in better shape, it can move on to the next task, right? So then you can skip that piece of the sleep process. Because one of the things that comes out in the book, which is fascinating and very counterintuitive, is if you interrupt sleep, it matters where you interrupt the sleep, right? So if you interrupt the first part of sleep, that has one emotional and physiological impact versus interrupting the end of sleep or the middle of
Mhm.
sleep. So different things are happening systematically in your sleep. And so if we can just shorten that bandwidth, I'll give you one kind of good sleep testimonial. I have a business coach, and what he says is that for 50 years, he needed an alarm clock to wake up. And since he's been taking the My Vital Sleep formula, he wakes up before the alarm clock. Now, he's a business coach, so he's got to go out and do networking. He's got to, so there's some late nights, late dinners, and then there's early mornings, depending the schedule kind of fluctuates quite a bit. Um, but in any time that he's on the product, in fact, sometimes he runs out, and 10 days after he runs out, he's back to using the alarm clock again. But he's waking up before the alarm clock because he's getting the sleep, the healing and restorative sleep that he needs, whether it's a shorter night or whether it's a longer night.
Mm. That's great. I think, yeah, the sleep quality is always essential to helping us heal and repair, recover, and clean out the bad stuff while we're sleeping. And that's why it's good to have your morning sleep routine as well as your evening routine to get the morning routine to improve your sleep and evening routine. And that includes not eating close to bed. So your body's doing all this stuff and not working on digesting that food you just ate before bed or having that alcohol before bed, because then your sleep is all messed up.
Yeah, yeah. Alcohol is yeah, I have kind of a parallel. So some small number of people report that if they take our product later in the day, it'll interrupt their sleep, right? It'll make
Mm,
it harder to fall asleep. And I got two comments on it. One that doesn't apply to me, but I'm also the guy who can have a cup of coffee and go to
yeah,
sleep. Now
genetics.
I know I have an aura ring, and I know it's not as good as sleep, but it doesn't keep me from sleeping, right? So I'm not lamenting that I can't sleep. Um, so that happens. I also think this does give you focus and energy. If you remember, there's 2 million mitochondria in your brain cells and in your nerve cells. Every other cell tends to have between 50 and 5,000. So there's so much potential for reducing the negative impact of overwhelmed mitochondria in your brain
Mhm.
and your nervous system. That's where I think we're seeing the positive impact the most.
Mm.
And that leads to testimonials. One of them, this is interesting. Lady sent me a video. I'd sent her some product. She sent me a video, and she started the video with, "I'm in the middle of the process of quitting smoking." Now, if you've ever been around anyone who's ever quit smoking, this is an irritable time to say the least, right? And I was just convinced there's no way I'm going to get a positive testimonial from her. She went on to give a very positive testimonial, and one sentence really stuck with me, which is, I found myself having a longer fuse with my son. So she had a young son. If you've ever had kids, like having a fuse with your kids is something that you have, and sometimes it's shorter, sometimes it's longer. But she described it as having a longer fuse. And again, that can lean back to sleep, right? Because if you don't get enough sleep, you actually will be more irritable. You will make less lower quality emotional decisions that next day, whether it's interacting with somebody, whether it's, whatever decisions that you're making for or against your health. So having that deeper healing and restorative sleep would have that impact. And I think that's what happened in her case.
Hmm. And back to, we are talking about CRP. What other markers would you look at functional lab testing, organic acids, mitochondria function? Have you done any studies looking at labs? And then biometrics is heart rate variability, low frequency, high frequency, any other data that would be good to test with this?
Yeah, so we did do a small sleep study. The way that that ended up happening is from a podcast I was on, I got put in contact with a gentleman by the name of Benjamin Smar. He was a consultant for Oura Ring and also, I think, an adjunct professor at University of California, San Diego. And so he had access or could get access with permission from customers to a lot more data behind the scenes. And so we put together this survey so we could start to look at, hey, what do we need to investigate? Survey study, and it was a crossover study. And what that means is we collected 10 days of survey data, and I'll tell you what we were collecting was how easy was it to fall asleep, how restless was your sleep, how good was your sleep, and then how good did you feel that next day. We collected 10 days of data before they started taking the product, 10 days when they were taking the product, 10 days back off the product, and then 10 days back on the product. That's called a crossover study. And 100% of the people, it's only 10. That was part of my note to my team yesterday is we need to get another 15 or more people through this. But 100% of those 10 participants reported improvements in sleep when they were on the product. And so we've done that. In terms of other things to look at, I'm very interested. We're kind of working on a project with it's an ad hoc product with a company called Ways to Well and MeScreen. So MeScreen is a new test that's come out. Kind of the chief scientist behind it is Dr. Emil Patel. Amazing guy. I actually got a chance to interview him, so that was pretty spectacular. And they're looking at from blood samples assessing mitochondrial function. Now, if you remember, I said blood cells don't have any mitochondria. So how do you assess
Yeah.
mitochondrial function from blood? And he's come up with a very cool process to assess it. They've got good confidence on it. They're working on that. So that's one kind of thing to be looking at. HSCRP turns out to be a pretty inexpensive test to do. And so we've already ordered some. My finger was pricked like last week, so I can understand like what does that process look like. So we're going to be getting the goal is to get 20 people through that, and that's one of the least expensive. Then you're right, we would be looking at interleukin 6. It's a more expensive test. We might be looking at TNF alpha, again, a more expensive test. That's just, to budget for these things, you gotta shoestring this. Like, what can we get done quickly and do an assessment? And HSCRP is the one that looks like it's going to be a good thing to champion us.
Average age are you looking at, men versus women, and what stage of life?
Yeah, I'm not too particular on that. Actually, I hadn't thought about that. Would we want a 25-year-old in the study? I'd be interested in understanding that, because you're going to have data in the beginning, you're going to have data afterwards, after they've taken the product for about 45 days. But in general, our customers tend to be men and women, fairly evenly mixed, 45 and over.
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's always great to look at studies. Who are they done on? What age? Is it college graduate class doing their thesis study? And I always laugh at all these different products that are helping with aging, but they're doing the tests on 20-something-year-olds or 30-year-olds. And it really, until you're in that second half of life, do you really probably want to test and see how you are aging. And as you're talking about your book, to live a longer, better life.
Yeah.
And what can you do about it?
Yeah. I don't know. Have you played around with any biological age tests?
Yes. Well, I
Yeah.
do that with Pinoe testing. When we test, there's 3 markers on the exercise test that we can do, the VO2 max and their fat burning efficiency, and another marker on there that they correlate to figure out your biological versus chronological age. And then I've done true diagnostics tests, which actually I have another one in my shelf I should do again, but that's one of the telomeres and saliva tests for that one.
I did my DNA age, and I'll share that result because I
Yeah,
didn't
that's what I
like it.
did, isn't it?
I didn't like it, and then it turned out good. And then I did glycan age. So the my DNA age test, the first time I took it, I was 51, and it had me at 59. So I wasn't really happy about that, but whatever. Like it's a number. I took it 3 years later, and it had me at 58. So actually, kind of reverse biological aging, still older than where I was, but going in the right direction, right? Glycan age is interesting. So it's looking at glycans. It's really heavily dependent on your body's inflammation.
Mhm.
And so, given what we've been talking about today, it might not surprise you that it had me at 21. And I kind of joke, if I'm biologically younger than 21, can I even drink? Like, I don't know what that looks like. But those are kind of the two tests that I've played around with so far.
Yeah. Good. Well, I think it's good to test and not guess and figure out what we should do to improve how we age so we are healthy from the inside out. And I always say you don't know what you don't know. So you could just go on and think this is a normal part of aging and you might feel this way, but you don't know how good you could feel if you just tweaked a few things and optimized your health at a cellular level to be in the ideal range versus normal. And I always think that with the lab results the doctors have that normal, nothing's wrong with you. You're just getting older. I just want to hit someone. It's
Yeah, I don't
to
want
be
to be normal.
optimal, not normal.
Optimal. Yes. What is the optimal range?
Yeah. So, what are some other tips you can leave us with on your book, Live Longer Better, and anything with your protocols for the product, how we can just improve our aging process?
Yeah, so I did some interesting things when I did the longevity summit. So the book walks you through, let me talk about that first. So the book kind of walks you through the discovery of the molecule. It's kind of interesting. The people who actually ran the test that ultimately kind of identified that the molecule existed, they didn't actually win the Nobel Prize. It's 3 other scientists did. So that's kind of, whatever gossip in the Nobel Prize winning world. That's covered in there. And then as I'm, kind of moving into the health space, absorbing content like David Sinclair, certainly Dave Asprey stuff, Ben Greenfield stuff. And so I kind of summarize some of that and really kind of mirror David Sinclair's advocating that we treat aging as a disease so
Mhm.
that we can actually start treating all of the diseases of aging, not just if funding one at a time. If we could just slow down aging, then we would actually slow down all of arthritis, cardiovascular disease, cancers, like all of those would be slowed down. And I think that is the absolute right approach. And then talk about, how long do we think humans can live like that? So that's in the book, Live Longer and Better. And then this is kind of fun. I did a longevity summit. I interviewed 55 experts. I asked each of them to give 2 to 3 habits, mindsets, protocols, we'll call them shortcuts, and aggregated that data. And it came out pretty interesting, right? So 33.3% of them mentioned sleep, 52% of them mentioned exercise, 52% of them mentioned diet, and then 46% mentioned mindset. And at first, I mean, given like a lot of our conversation today has been about sleep, right? And so 33 and a third, so 33.3 mentioned sleep and 46 mentioned mindset. At first, I was like, maybe they got that wrong, right? Because sleep is so important. And then, a couple days you ruminate over something. I was like, wait a minute, right? If you need to start putting your device down before you go to sleep, but you don't have the mindset to do it. If you need to start moving more or faster or harder or some,
Yeah.
and you don't have the mindset to do it. If you need to change your diet, and get off of the standard American diet, but you don't have the mindset to do it, none of it's going to happen. And so I think they, ironically, post-analysis, they did get it wrong. Mindset is even more important than sleep, exercise, and diet. Like if you don't have the mindset to make the changes, then you actually aren't going to make the changes. And that's the key thing, is how do we get the mindset right?
Well, I'm laughing because that's what behavior change is. And there's a new health and wellness board certification that's being required now for everyone as a coach or practitioner. And it is, as a practitioner, I'm more of a health investigator and helping putting the missing pieces of a puzzle for someone individually to figure out what's best for them based on what we identify. But then it's the next step is how do you implement that? And it is mindset, but behavior change. And the coaching part of it, you're guiding someone to make those changes because everyone knows they should eat certain way or exercise more and move more. But then how do you actually implement those strategies into your life? And yeah, getting off your cell phone at night and getting up out of bed in the morning, getting out and seeing that sunlight, and all that makes sense that it is mindset, but behavior changes to make those efforts to improve sleep. So I can see that's all connected.
Yeah, I think it's so important. I'm kind of I've been working on like a 6 week course, and I throw in a bonus initial week, which is just mindset. Right? Like just spend a little bit of time. Let's try and get the mindset right. Let's try and understand why we're really going down this path. I really think coaches bump into really quickly people's Darren Hardy calls it set point. A good friend of mine, Patrick Wanis, calls it the law of deservedness. Like this is where you believe you're supposed to be, and you as a coach are able to get them to go walk. Well, you've already put them past where they were supposed to be, maybe improved diet and a couple of other things. But your first thing you do and that they do is push them outside of their own set point. So now you got to start working on fixing that set point. And my friend Patrick has this thing called a subconscious rapid transformation technique that can help do that.
So important. Well, we're out of time already, but where can people learn more about your product, your book, your summits?
Yeah, so we've made a special URL for your audience, right? So that's My Vital C, C as in carbon. So myvitalc.com / Coach Debbie Potts. There is a special coupon code on that page also. That'll get you $15 off of your initial order. Our product is, man, we probably didn't even really talk about this. Our product is as much of this ESS60 molecule as we can get to dissolve in 3 different oils, right? So olive oil, avocado oil, or MCT oil. People ask, well, which one should I take? We recommend olive oil for 2 reasons. The first is we're a science-based organization and all the research is on the ESS60 molecule in olive oil. The second reason is you get the highest concentration of the ESS60 molecule in olive oil. You get about 0.8 milligrams per milliliter in olive oil, 0.6 in avocado oil, and then 0.3 in MCT oil. So we always recommend that you start with the olive oil. I'll just share my routine. I do kind of a bulletproof coffee thing, which is typically a high quality coffee, an MCT and ghee, which is purified butter. I don't want all the calories of the purified butter, so I'm just doing the coffee and some of our MCT, about 1.5 teaspoons of that. While that's mixing, because it's oil and water, it needs to mix, emulsify. I take 1.5 teaspoons of our olive oil product. When you go to that page, again, myvitalc.com / Coach Debbie Potts, you can get a 25% discount by going on subscription. Even if you just want to try it once, go ahead and go on subscription. Don't worry, our customer service team has 1,000 5-star reviews on Google. They're not trained to talk you out of canceling your subscription. Take advantage of that discount. A lot of people stay, but do take advantage of that discount. And there is that coupon code there. I want to talk a little bit about the book. The book is not on that landing page, but go to that landing page and go to the menu structure. You can find the book on Amazon or on our website. It's $20 on Amazon, $20 on our website. But we have a special charity piece to the book if you get it from our website. If you want a signed copy of it, that's $10 extra. The $10 goes to Operation Underground Railroad. You may remember a movie called The Sound of Freedom. horrible movie about, I mean, it was a great movie, but about the horrible nature of child sex trafficking.
Mm.
I happened to see the guy who's represented in that movie, on the good side, of course, at a talk before that movie came out. The movie is an amazing movie. It's a tearjerker, but so 100% of the signature fee goes to Operation Underground Railroad.
Hmm, great. Well, we'll put all the links in the show notes, and I appreciate you following your purpose and your passion and having a good mission to help us improve the aging process.
Thank you so much, Debbie.